Welcome back to the Crash Course Podcast. My name is Craig Crash Collins, joined as always by Brandon Scott, otherwise known as B. Scott. We've got a lot to get into, a lot of hoops to talk about tonight. Really excited to get to that. We talk about the NBA All-Star Game this past weekend. That was really fun. We talk about, the conference tournaments coming up. We're also going to be talking about the Indiana Pacers as well. So a lot to get to. One little bit of breaking news that came out a little bit before the podcast started. That, of course, is Dak Prescott signing to a long-term contract. So that's nice to see. So claps for him. We talked about him possibly going to the Colts because we didn't know what the heck the Cowboys were doing, B. Scott. And they finally kind of came together and got something done.
Good for him, finally. I mean, it's got to get old being franchise tagged year after year. So for him to finally land that long-term deal, good.
Yeah, very good for him. But we're not going to talk a whole lot of football tonight. We're going to get into some hoops as well. And let's go ahead and get right into it. The NBA All-Star Weekend and really just All-Star Day because it was all pretty much going on Sunday. Started with the skills challenge. Domas Sabonis gets the win there. How long have they been doing it with you go head to head with the other? I thought it was always you got timed.
It's been a while now. Yeah, it's been a while.
For some reason, I don't remember that being. I thought it was always timed, but maybe it's been a minute since I watched the skills challenge.
It is timed, but it's head-to-head timed.
I gotcha.
You still want to finish faster than the other person.
I got you.
I think it's always been that way. The only one I think what you're thinking of is the 3-point contest.
Maybe that's
never been truly head-to-head at the same time. That's been timed.
And speaking of the 3-point contest, Steph Curry wins that one in amazing fashion. Last second shot to beat Mike Conley, so that was fun. Dunk contest at the... not for you, B. Scott. You got a little bit more tied into that one.
You know what? I'll get into this a little bit later, but it's good nonetheless.
And then of course the dunk contest happens at halftime. Anthony Simmons from the Portland Trail Blazers wins that one. So that was interesting. I do like having the dunk contests at halftime, if for no better reason than it cuts down on all the attempts. I know they cut down on that a couple of years ago, how many times you could attempt the same dunk, but it's good to kind of tie that all in together. And then of course the All-Star Game, Team LeBron wins 170 to 150. The MVP is Giannis. So all in all, it was a really fun day to watch. I actually tuned into a bulk of the evening. I watched got tuned in about first quarter, the actual All-Star Game itself, and then kind of locked in. And the fact that it was all one night made it more exciting and elevated what was a middle-of-the-road All-Star Game. I mean, the All-Star Game itself wasn't super entertaining. It wasn't what it was last year. But where it was actually down to the wire, but it was, I think the fact that there was all the other hype with the surrounding events kind of lifted it up and made it a little bit better. And then, I do have, we talked about the dunk contest. I had a little bit of a hot take going into, talking about that. Can we just get rid of the dunk contest altogether? I'm in favor of getting rid of the dunk contest because not just because Cassius Stanley had, probably the best dunk arguably of the whole entire time. But I mean, for one, we're giving people the players that win the dunk contest credit for doing things they didn't even do. I remember going back all the way to Dwight Howard when he won, I think the first time, where he didn't even dunk. He threw the ball into the rim and they were like, oh my gosh, it's an incredible dunk. This time, Anthony Simmons, they're like, he kissed the rim. No, he didn't. He blew a kiss at the rim, which, okay, obviously, it's amazing what these athletes can do. We take it for granted sometimes. But at the same time, they gave him credit for kissing the rim. They're like, oh, what an amazing, thought. And then they're like, he didn't execute it. It could have been done better, but that's what he tried to do. So congratulations, you're the dunk contest winner. I feel like there could be something else we could do that could incorporate dunking, like maybe a game of horse, something that you could do, maybe a one-on-one tournament with some players. I don't know. Something where we can still get the dunking that we crave, but just the dunk contest is kind of played out at this point, in my opinion.
Oh yeah, the dunk contest used to be about creativity and seeing like the pure athleticism on display. I remember when the windmill dunk would actually just win you the dunk contest because that was completely unheard of at the time. But because all the dunks are so overdone and just they happen so frequently now, like it's gotten down to gimmicks, and it's no longer really about dunking the ball. It's about how cool can you make it look and really not dunk the ball. So I agree. I'd be okay with getting rid of it. I'm okay. I'll admit I did not watch a single bit of the All-Star game or the festivities. Like I was just telling you off air, I am out on the NBA right now. I'm not into it this year. I'm just not. But
And why
yeah,
is that, B Scott? You can go ahead and get into it now if you want to.
well, first I'll say, I do like the idea of a condensed version of the All-Star game with all the festivities because I mean, if I wasn't so down on the NBA this year, I probably would have tuned in and watched a little bit because I like the skills contest and the 3-point shooting contest. I do enjoy those, so that would force me to watch a little bit of the game. Um, but also at the same time, when it does come to Indianapolis, I kind of hope they don't just condense it into one day. Having it a full weekend event is better for the city. But
I think you could still make like the classic stuff one day, like the dunk contest, 3-point challenge, skills challenge. That can all be the day of the actual All Star game, and they can, eventually, hopefully, once you can actually have like full, fledged festivities, you could add things to the weekend. You could
well,
add,
I do like those other events being a part of the All-Star game itself because you actually got those players actually that were All-Stars actually participated. Like Steph Curry would not have gone out there 2 days in a row and done anything, but because he was already out there, might as well do it, or Sabonis always tries to do the skills challenge, so I'm not that surprised there. I am happy to see that he won. That just goes to prove how good of a big man he is.
yeah.
But if you can get more of the bigger names to participate, that's great. So, like I said, I was happy. Unhappy that Mike Conley lost in the 3-point contest, but happy to see that Steph Curry participated. That actually brings some oomph to the contest. It's like, oh, so and so's the best 3-point shooter in the NBA from the 3-point contest. It's like, no, they're really not. It's Steph Curry. We all know that. And then he goes out there and does it, and it goes, okay, yes, the best 3-point shooter in the NBA actually won the 3-point contest. So you like to see those types of things. But I'm really down on the NBA right now just because I don't like the turn it is taking in terms of parity or competition. I mean, just recently, Blake Griffin forced his way or basically came to an agreement with the Pistons, or he basically stopped wanting to play for them. And they came to an agreement, bought him out, and then he's able to go sign wherever he wanted. And teams just let it happen, instead of rather picking him up on waivers or whatever, just kind of let him slide by. And he goes and basically signs, I don't know exactly what the details are, but it can't be very much to go play for the Brooklyn Nets. Yes, I know he wants to win a ring. Good for you. But essentially now that team is Kyrie Irving, James Harden, Kevin Durant, DeAndre Jordan, and Blake Griffin. Who in the East is competing with that? At least when there was the big three with the Miami Heat, at least the Pacers had a team that were capable of beating them or pushing them into a game 7, making it look competitive. But seriously, now who is going to in the East who has the ability to step up and beat that team?
Yeah, no, I'm with you because
I mean, it's ridiculous. It's like, so as a Pacers fan, it's like, why am I going to watch? Why? What is the draw for me to tune into a Pacers game, especially if they make the playoffs? What's the draw? At this point, I'd rather the Pacers not make the playoffs, get a good draft pick, and start building for when the dumpster fire ends up inevitably happening to the Brooklyn Nets because they overspent, they lost all their draft picks, whatever it may be. It's going to come around and bite them in the butt eventually, like it did when they tried to make their big 3 last time. But it's ridiculous. At this point, it is going to be the Brooklyn Nets and the Los Angeles Lakers in the NBA Finals.
Well,
and if anybody picks otherwise, I mean, you can say, oh, but the Jazz. Really, how many times has LeBron not been the number one seed in the playoffs? Just last year. Wasn't the number one seed in the playoffs and went on to win the NBA Finals because he knows he just turns it on in the playoffs. We've always talked about that. But it's so, I don't know. The fact that the players, the players need to have control over their careers and everything, but they control, like, it's getting to a point where the owners are just bending over backwards and saying, I don't know, like, really, the Pistons, okay, if he's not happy, let him sit. Detroit, are you going anywhere anyways? No, but let him sit. You know, if he's unhappy, he's unhappy. He has a contract. You don't have to buy him out because that still puts you in a bad position. You got absolutely nothing for him other than you're taking a cap hit. I mean, what's the point?
Yeah, I mean, it's a combination of what you're saying as far as, like, it's basically turned into too much of a players' league, as well as basically just because, I mean, essentially what this is you're putting the, like, 2015, a team like the 2015, like, Warriors, into, you're even the 2017-18, the Warriors teams with Kevin Durant into the East, like, as the way it currently is, where, like, half the teams are under 500 anyway.
But at least with the Warriors, they were fun to watch because when you looked at them, they brought in Kevin Durant.
Yeah.
Everybody else they drafted. They built that team through the draft. They built it as a medium-sized market. They did what they had to do, and they were able to, because of the way they built it, bring in Kevin Durant for a few seasons. I'm okay with that. If by luck you have drafted well enough to have your own big three, and then somebody comes and joins in because of the capabilities, I'm okay with that. But I mean, it's one thing. Yeah, okay. James Harden wanted out, and Houston traded him. That's fine. I have no problem with that. Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving they wanted to play together, and they signed with Brooklyn. I'm okay with that as well because they were in free agency. But now you've got players that are trying to get themselves out of their contracts, and they're going to go sign with Brooklyn.
Yeah.
Or LA. It's Brooklyn or LA. And I start feeling bad for players like Giannis. I mean, for goodness sakes, this comes right back down to the argument for the Pacers too, as well. But who in their right mind is going to go sign in Milwaukee when you could go play for the Brooklyn Nets, the coolest team out there, the flashy jerseys, the amazing technicolored floor? I mean, it's basically NBA 2K in real life with the Brooklyn Nets. So do we all not remember that they used to be the New Jersey Nets, the armpit of America, for goodness sakes? I mean, I don't know. It's just like, and I know you can argue, well, hey, the 90s, they were dominated by Jordan and the Bulls. Yeah, but Jordan and the Bulls did it the same way the Golden State Warriors did it. They drafted these players. They developed these players. These players grew. They brought in a legitimate coach. They didn't bring in somebody that just to be flashy. I mean, I'm sorry, but Steve Nash does not have the experience to be a championship-winning coach. He just does not. When I think of championship-winning coaches, those guys are gone now. They're gone. It's basically, can you just stand there on the sidelines and kind of try to manage the team? Be a talking puppet, essentially. The days of a Phil Jackson or a Larry Brown, or I hate to say it, but even a Rick Carlisle, even though he's still down in Dallas trying to do a win down there. But guys like that, Larry Bird, Bird could never coach in the league now because he would expect too much from his players.
I would say, like, Brad Stevens, Greg Popovich, Eric Spoelstra, Frank Vogel. I would put, not on the same level as Phil Jackson, because, that's a tier all in and of itself, but at the same time, like, those are guys to where, like, if you put them on, as the head coach, like, I could see that being like, okay, well, we want a little bit of coaching, a little bit more know-how,
right.
besides
I will agree with that. Yeah.
Besides just, hey, let's bring in this guy that, is...
And that's what surprised me, what the Lakers bringing in Frank Vogel, because for so long, well, I guess, LeBron has had that coaching before. He had Eric Spoelstra. But at the time, Eric Spoelstra was pretty young, but it goes back then to, the owner or the president of, being Pat Riley. So that's a little different. I guess I will eat my words there.
The closest to what you're talking about is, I think, David
When
Blatt.
He was in Cleveland, and Ty Lue.
Ty Lue.
Ty Lue was a talking puppet.
And David Blatt too, right?
What?
Is that was the coach before David Blatt? Am I getting his name right? I'm
pretty sure Ty Lue was the one that they won the championship.
No, I think he is, but I'm saying, I think the first year that he was back, there was a guy that was there for 1 year, and then Luke Walton, his first year in LA, was.
Well, that was. I feel bad for Luke Walton because he actually was a really good stand-in coach for Steve Kerr in the Warriors.
Yeah.
And I think he just kind of got a raw deal of having to come in and try to put together that team in LA, and that was just and you're having to deal also at the same time with actually that wasn't LeBron. He didn't have LeBron.
He didn't? I thought he did. I thought Luke was there at the very start, and then the following year.
They didn't have Anthony Davis yet. LeBron, and it was just LeBron, and it was Lonzo Ball. So it wasn't a raw deal with LeBron. It was LeVar Ball that he had to deal with. LeVar Ball wanted him fired, and that's ultimately what happened because he was the loudest voice out there.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I don't enjoy watching the NBA anymore just because it's like, what's the point? Like, I'll watch college basketball. I love it because, you may know your team's probably going to lose and they're not going to win the national championship, but anything can happen any given night. Whereas in the NBA, it's just kind of ho-hum. I mean, I think, like I said, I wouldn't be mad if the Pacers didn't make the playoffs this year because I think it sets them up better.
Yeah,
why go out there and put yourself at risk for injury when Brooklyn's already just going to steamroll their way all the way through to the finals, when you can not make the playoffs, get in the mix for the lottery, maybe you get lucky there, and
Yeah,
I'm looking big picture for the Pacers. The Pacers have a potential to contend in the future. Maybe.
Hopefully.
Let's just be honest. The Pacers will never contend.
Yeah.
Not with the current atmosphere of the NBA.
It's a combination of the fact that there's like I said, there's just people the players have a little bit too much power, as well as everybody's ring chasing, and and because that's the only value that fans put on if you're good in the NBA or not. There's no Charles Barkley, I think, in today's NBA would be looked at as a mediocre to bad player because he doesn't have a ring.
Well, and even back then, it's like these guys wanted their team to be the best. They had a loyalty to the team, and they wanted their team to be the best team. They didn't, they wanted to go out and prove themselves against each other rather than let's just all get together and win a ring. That's the difference. Those guys wanted to battle each other and prove it against each other. Whereas today's guys are like, man, I can't do it alone. Come with me. I'll come with you. Where do we want to go? Let's, that's the biggest difference. The mindset I feel like these players have.
Yeah. And it is eventually going to just kill off the rest of the league as far as so it'll be interesting to see how it.
I mean, you look at when there are fans in the stands, you go to a Pacers game, and how many people do you see? You can always tell which games are going to be the hardest to get a ticket for because of who they're playing. And if you go to that game or you're watching that game on TV, majority of the people in the stands are wearing a LeBron jersey or wearing a Kevin Durant jersey or somebody else's jersey. They're not there because they're from Indiana and they're fans of the Pacers. They're there because of the other team. And it's just you see the few diehard Pacers fans, but the rest of them are there because they want to see LeBron play.
Yeah, I'm with you. Steering back a little bit more on course here, are we in agreement that the NBA All-Star Game should be condensed All-Star Weekend like we saw this past weekend should carry over to next year? You would like to see that?
Yeah, and I would still maybe the day before the All-Star Game have the futures game like they did, USA versus the world.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Because I'm in agreement. I think it makes it makes the main event. If the All-Star game is kind of because it was entertaining for a 20-point loss. It was like okay to watch, but at the same time it wasn't super entertaining. So it kind of elevates everything else, which is what I liked about it. We touched on the Pacers a little bit. And so I want to do a little bit of a conversation about them as we get into it here. Before because we're talking about, of course, the second half of the season coming up. Right now, Pacers are 16-19. They're 10th in the East. They're on pace for a record of 32-40. We had two hot or cold questions. The first one was the All-Star game when we got a little sidetracked. So we do want to get back into some hot and cold right now. Hot or cold, the Pacers will miss the playoffs this season. Honestly, I think that I wrote down hot. What I meant was cold.
That's what I was wondering, because I looked at your reasoning. I was like, that does not say
right. So it's a cold take because I think the bottom of the East is still weak enough. There is some rumors that Karis LeVert is possibly debuting soon. I don't know when that will be. But that will lift up the team and be a big kind of shot in the arm as well for the team. So I think the East is still bad enough for the Pacers and the Pacers are still good enough for them to still make their way in. I think the addition of LeVert will kind of boost them up a little bit. So I think they make the playoffs, but like you said, I mean, it's not going to be what we originally thought it was going to be, a season where, okay, they're going to kind of be in the middle of the East and we'll see what happens. It's going to be kind of, they make the playoffs and, hey, we thought this year was going to be different. Maybe we're going to have like a third straight year of like, hey, the Pacers got swept in the first round again, but the future's bright.
Yeah, I'm going to say this is a hot take. The Pacers not making the playoffs. Mostly because, one, we do not know if or when TJ Warren is going to be back, and that's a big one. We do not know, even if he is back, how good it will, what kind of level of play will he be at because he's been out for so long. And then Karis LeVert, they say he's going to be making his debut here before too long, but they don't really put a timetable on it. And same thing with him. I mean, I guess, he's had enough time now to get an understanding of what the playbook looks like, but for me, the biggest thing about the Pacers is if those two guys aren't playing, where are the shots coming from? I don't feel like the Pacers are a cohesive unit right now. They just kind of seem off. Where's that team that was fighting early on in the season? It seems like ever since they traded Victor Oladipo, they have been a bad team. So was Victor Oladipo really that big of a glue piece for this roster? Did he cover up that many deficiencies? It's hard to know. I think right now what it is, though, they just don't have enough pieces. They don't have enough to really stretch the floor. I mean, okay, who's going to take the shot? It's probably going to be Malcolm Brogdon. All right, key on him. All right, down low, it's going to be Sabonis. Key on him. I mean, those guys are still putting up their numbers, but they can't carry the team 100%. They need other people to help them. And that help just isn't there right now. So, like I said earlier, if the Pacers make the playoffs, great. They'll probably get in as an 8 or a 7 and get bounced in the first round as usual. And, it doesn't help them at all. But to be honest, I do believe the Pacers missing the playoffs might just be the best thing for them. Go ahead, trade Miles Turner, whatever you need to do. So let's start looking at the future because this team's not winning right now. They're not, unless all of a sudden you get 2 more All-Stars to come over between now and, the end of the season, they're not going to contend. So why not? Let's start looking bigger picture as a team. Am I saying tank? Oh, by no means. Don't tank because that's just not Pacers style at all. But what I am saying is if TJ Warren's not 100%, hold him out. Let him get back to being 100%. Karis LeVert, no reason to rush him back either. I think that's probably the best move for the Pacers is to look big picture.
Yeah, I think that, it's one of those things where I think as far as the Victor Oladipo thing goes, I think the main issue is because I've made this comparison a bunch, on this podcast. The fact that the Pacers remind me a lot of like the Tampa Bay Rays, like in baseball, where they are a contending team year in year out, but they make some decisions that kind of make you scratch your head, and they're good. They're all about finding the cheaper option. Victor Oladipo is going to demand a bigger contract. He was, we're kind of heard rumors of him possibly not being disgruntled. So let's go find someone who's going to put up Oladipo like numbers, but cheaper and younger. So they go get Karis LeVert, and then of course it gets found out that he's got a mass and he's missed time. And then the timing of the Victor Oladipo trade was not ideal in the sense that they were still without T.J. Warren. So like that's now two pieces that you're down. You're now down Oladipo and Warren. Then now it's like you said, it's now you can key in on certain guys, and it's made it more difficult. But I think in the long run, it is going to be good. And I mean, why not, in a sense, hit the reset button a little bit, because now you've got, it's one of those things where, as a Pacers fan, we've talked about a lot of, big possibilities on this podcast before with the Pacers. Not really necessarily believing it, but saying that there is a path to see it happen, like LeBron to the Pacers, Kevin Durant to the Pacers, Klay Thompson to the Pacers, all things that have been brought up on this podcast that we've been like, hey, do we think it's going to happen? Probably not, but there is an avenue to get there. And so now that there's basically an all-star team in Brooklyn, you're like, all right, well, even if the Pacers do something unprecedented and go get a star, they're still about, a couple stars too short. So, why not blow it up a bit and kind of start retooling for, like you said, when that Nets, when that house of cards eventually folds.
Right. Like I said, bigger picture right now is the best move for the Pacers.
So what do you expect in the second half? For me, you mentioned it, and I'm right there with you. It makes sense right now to just go ahead and trade Miles Turner. He's having a solid season. T.J. Warren is still a long way from returning. Miles Turner's value is at a pretty good peak, and I know that, as I hate myself for saying that, because as a sports fan, that's all, there's people out there all in the Twitterverse and in the social media verse that whenever a good player is playing well, you want to see your team get rid of them, so that way you can get rid of them when the value's high and not get bitten by, them leaving in free agency or leaving of their own accord or forcing a trade. But, and I think they can still make the playoffs, but they're not going to contend. Even it's kind of one of those things where, would you rather trade Miles Turner, get some talent back, get a better draft pick by being, more middle of the road, even if you make the playoffs? Or would you rather make the playoffs this year, get beat by the Bucks or the Nets or the, Celtics or whoever in the first round, and you're back to square one, but at least you hung on to some of these pieces while their value is probably at their highest. So I think it's the right move to trade Miles Turner. It's one of those things where, like, yeah, it pains me to say it because I like Miles Turner, but at the end of the day, you just got to do what you got to do. And I think hitting the reset button a little bit is going to be good, just for the sense that, I mean, we saw them start to make some of those moves where it looked like they were going to, look more towards trying to contend and try to, build something a little bit more competitive, towards the top of the East by going out and getting Brogdon, going out and getting Lamb. But it's just not worked out to this point, and just in the sense of injuries and, also other teams just completely getting jacked as far as their roster goes. So I think right now is the time to just trade. If you make the playoffs, great. You're going to make it as a 7 or 8 seed and get bounced in the first round. You're still going to have a good draft pick regardless of whether or not you make it. So go ahead.
Oh, no. You have a chance to have a better draft pick if you don't make the playoffs.
Well, right. But I mean, you know what I mean? Like, if they make it, it's not going to, because I don't think they're going to be, I think they're going to finish around, if they don't make the playoffs, I can see them finishing like 10th or 11th. If they make the playoffs, I can see them being like 7th. So I think they have like a 7th to 12th window. I don't see them like dropping all the way down to like the last place in the East or anything like that. No. So like, I think you're going to see a more similar draft pick. I mean, yes, it'll technically be higher if you miss, but I'm saying like, you're going to be kind of in that same range of picks, whether or not you make the playoffs or not. So why not, just kind of go for it now, make some trades of some people and get some good quality back.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think they need to be active at the trade deadline. I think basically when you look at this roster, there are two players that are untouchable: Malcolm Brogdon and Domantas Sabonis. Plain and simple. I think everybody else is up for grabs, especially Miles Turner. I think right now you have to get something while the oven's hot for him, to be honest. I mean, what that is, it all depends. Do you want to try to contend this year? I mean, or, make a push for the playoffs, or are you looking to build for the future? That's kind of what they need to figure out. I mean, regardless, I think they need that's the one thing that needs to happen is Miles Turner needs to be moved. I hate to say it because he is playing so well, but he and Sabonis just still don't mesh together. And I know it leaves you with, size off the bench, but really he's not coming off the bench. He's still starting. What you need is a Thad Young, to be honest, at the power forward position. But I think that's the biggest move. And then if need be, I think another player, if you want to package him with Miles Turner, which a lot of teams would be appreciative of, is Jeremy Lamb. He's just not the same player that he was, which I can't blame him. He's still coming back from a pretty bad knee injury. And I think right now, if you can get a better return by packaging Jeremy Lamb in there, you go for it, or even a Doug McDermott. I think one other player that may not be touchable just because teams don't want him, which I'm okay with. I'm okay. This is the player I want on my team who's going to be a really good future coach, in my opinion, but TJ McConnell. TJ McConnell is, in my opinion, one of the better players, most underrated players on this Pacer roster. But trades are what the Pacers need to do. You need to start looking at putting together a roster that Nate Bjorken can really mold to his, knowing that Sabonis and Brogdon are his two stars.
Well, it's about time for us to start talking about the conference tournaments, but we are about, 35 minutes in, so let's go ahead and get to our friends of the show, and then we'll talk about some conference tournaments. The Crash Course Podcast is brought to you by Anchor. Looking to start a podcast but don't know where to start? Look no further than Anchor.fm. Anchor allows you to record and edit your podcast right from your computer or mobile device, and will distribute it to other sites such as Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify. On a budget, not only is Anchor completely free of charge, but will allow you to make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. Download the free Anchor app or go to Anchor.fm to get started. Anchor, it's everything you need in a podcast in one place.
Are you tired of your same old lunch hour of sitting and scrolling through your apps on your smartphone? Have you thought about playing a board game with your coworkers? Eat Lunch and Board Game is a podcast dedicated to telling you about board games that are great for lunchtime fun and some that are probably better saved for after work hours. I've been playing games at my office for over 4 years now, where I have made new friends and business connections that have been very useful. Board games build bridges.
We want to remind you guys that you can follow us on Facebook, Crash Course Podcast. Follow us on Twitter at Crash Course FM. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel, Crash Course Podcast. The MCT podcast has been killing it. They've been getting a lot of views. You guys have been showing a lot of love there. We've been getting a lot of love on the Crash Course Podcast as well here recently on YouTube. I think we mentioned it last week, just surpassed 25 subscribers. So thank you guys for all the love on the YouTube channel. That's been going really well lately, so we really appreciate that. And then remember, you can watch the live recording of the Crash Course Podcast every week, twitch.tv/3C Media. We do have some people in the chat right now. Dusty asks if we think that Seattle will let Russell Wilson go. I'd like to think not.
No, they're not. They're not. They know if they were going to move him, there'd be people willing enough to pay up the price.
That is true. That's a good point. Yeah, I don't think they will either, but I do see Russell Wilson's gripe with the fact that they've just not. It's kind of almost it's very similar to the Carson Wentz issue in Philadelphia, where they put a championship team together, and then as those pieces went away, they haven't replaced the pieces that are going away. So they had the Doug Baldwins of the world, the really good receivers. And now they pretty much have Tyler Lockett. Now, of course, they did get DK Metcalf.
Where's he going off to?
I think he's retired at this point, right?
He was so young.
Doug Baldwin?
He did retire, didn't he?
I think so, yeah. I mean, they had some solid tight ends. I don't really know that they've got really anybody good now. Of course, we all know who they had at running back for a long time. Marshawn Lynch. They haven't really. I mean, they have like Chris Carson, I think, is the running back. So yeah, so they haven't really done a good job at like refilling the tank, and I can see Russell Wilson's great for sure. And then also remember, you can listen to us every week: Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, wherever podcasts can be heard. You can hear the Crash Course podcast. It is conference tournament week. I'm really excited because it's the podcast. Last year, we were one podcast away from the NCAA tournament, and here, before everything kind of went crazy. So here we are again, precipice of the NCAA tournament. But first, we got to get to the conference tournaments. Really excited to talk about those. Some teams have already clinched, the likes of Liberty, Morehead State, Winthrop, Loyola. All have punched their tickets to the dance. We're really excited to see the NCAA tournament this year. And so we're going to talk about, of course, the conference tournaments that have Indiana schools, the D1 Indiana schools. A lot of the other conferences that contain Indiana schools have already had their tournaments and are done. Of course, Loyola is the is the conference that has Valpo and Indiana State, so their seasons are over. Ball State's season is not technically over, but they're going to play a Toledo team that beat them by like 20 the other night, so their season's probably over. So we basically just have the Power 5 Indiana schools to get to.
Might do for Ball State basketball coach.
Yes, let's do that to turn things around. Honestly, why is his name escaping me right now? The head coach of James Whitford.
Yeah.
Yeah. The coach for.
No. Yeah. Whitford.
Yeah.
Yeah. He used to coach under Sean Miller, little Archie's brother.
Yeah. Yeah, and like. They had a few years where Ball State was really good, and then just the last few years have just not been great. So he's probably on the hot seat. We'll see if he's on his way out. It kind of is a bummer because he did really well, and I thought he was going to be the guy. But we'll see what happens there. But hopping into it, let's go ahead and start with the ACC. Of course, the home of Notre Dame. Virginia wins the regular season. They're the best team. They've been on. They've been, and I've been not only surprised, but heck, they've been a power now for years in the ACC. So it's really cool to see like some different teams. When we grew up, it was pretty much Duke or North Carolina, and that's about it. Now you see the likes of Virginia, Florida State up there, so that's cool. Notre Dame finishes number 11 in the conference. They will face Wake Forest in the opening round. They finished 10-14, 7-11 in the ACC. They lost 4 of 5 in the season. They're not projected in the NCAA tournament, and likely will not be in the NCAA tournament unless they win the ACC. It will take a lot of willing for them to get in, so they will likely not. And so that's the question: how far will they get in the ACC tournament? For me, they against Wake in the opening round, they did beat Wake by 21 in the regular season. They would face North Carolina with a win, and they lost to the Tar Heels by just a point in the regular season. So my prediction is that Notre Dame this season, they've got a lot of talent. Even though it's not the Notre Dame we're used to seeing that goes to, Sweet 16s, Elite 8s, that quality, they still have some talent. They have a great junior class that I think if they add some more pieces in recruiting, we'll kind of see what happens next season. So I think they've got some talent. I think they definitely beat Wake Forest in the first round. And heck, it's March. I want to pick some upsets. I have them beating North Carolina in the second round as well. The run does end against Virginia Tech, but I really have a lot of faith in Princess Hub and that junior class to make some noise. So I really think Notre Dame's going to have an okay run. Like it's not going to be a run where you're going to remember it in a year or two, but it's going to be something where like, hey, you know what? It was that's going to kind of put a bow on the season next year. Give them some momentum going into next season.
Yeah. So funny story with Notre Dame. The first game back that they allowed students was against Florida State, and the students started chanting "Fire Bray," and then the Notre Dame went out and beat Florida State.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, that's great. I agree. I think Notre Dame, just the way the matchups that are playing out ahead of them, um, that does favor Notre Dame to at least make it to the quarterfinals, and I think that would make their season a success, kind of the way things unfolded. So yeah, I think they can make it to the quarterfinals, and heck, they could upset Virginia Tech. Let's just be honest. That's a possibility. The way Notre Dame is playing right now, they are playing better. But at this point, I'm still going to say the buck stops there at the quarterfinals against Virginia Tech.
Yeah, if they can beat Virginia Tech, because the teams that I really have faith in the ACC are really Virginia and Florida State. From beyond that, I'm not saying it's like those two teams and the rest are imposters and phonies. I'm not saying that. I just don't. Like, if I'm filling out a bracket, I'm feeling more confident about picking Virginia and Florida State than I am Virginia Tech, depending on who they're playing. So yeah, I think that is a possibility. If they can if Notre Dame could get to the Final Four of the ACC, that would be wild. But yeah, I think that's a pretty solid prediction. I think they have a decent run come tournament time. Question is, though, who wins the ACC tournament? I'm going to go with Florida State. I know I just talked about Virginia for a little bit, how dominant they've been, but Florida State, missed getting number 1 seed in the ACC by a game. They've been just as good as Virginia, and they've won 5 of the last 7 to end the season, so they're playing really good basketball right now. So I'm going to go with Florida State, being a little bit different, picking some upsets. I've got Florida State winning the ACC.
I'm going to go with Virginia. Tony Bennett just seems to get that team on at this point of year. Ever since they got embarrassed by UMBC as a 1 seed, they've just been different. So yeah, I'm going with Virginia, mostly because Florida State needs to prove it to me, to be honest.
True.
I got at this time of year when the going gets tough, I have to go with the team that's got the coaching staff that's got the experience of getting their team through it.
Yeah, Florida State to me seems like kind of like the Florida State football team that we grew up with, like kind of at the end of the Bobby Bowden run, where like they're a good team, but like they also have kind of that I'm trying to think of another team that kind of has that Toronto Raptors, like old Toronto Raptors, where you'd have no faith in for what Virginia was before they got beat, before they actually won the whole thing, So yeah, I agree with you. They have some of that quality in them, but I'm hoping it goes a little bit differently. Of course, it is the crash kiss of death for a reason, so who knows. Now we do have to take a step outside the Power 5 conferences just to make sure that we get the Big East in there, because of course that contains Butler. Villanova wins the regular season in the Big East. Not really a shocker there. Butler finishes 10th. They will face Xavier in the opening round. They finished 9-14, 8-12 in the Big East. They lost 4 of 8 to end the season, but of course they always seem to manage to beat Villanova. They beat them, the number 8 team in the country. They would have to win the Big East to make the NCAA tournament. How far will the Butler Bulldogs make it in the Big East tournament? They did sweep Xavier in the regular season, and I know that it's really tough to beat a team 3 times in the season, no matter what sport it is. I know we talked about it a lot, football season as well. But as they, the Musketeers, though, have lost 5 of their last 7 games, so they may have caught Xavier at kind of a bad moment. So maybe if Xavier were playing a little bit better, I'd say, hey, you know what, Xavier's going to win, Butler's going to lose. So I am going to pick Butler to beat Xavier, but I don't think they're going to get past Creighton. It's going to be kind of a disappointing end of the season for Butler. I don't think they make some sort of magical run. It seems like unless Butler's playing Villanova, you might as well pick whoever they're playing in the Big East.
Yeah, I don't have much faith in Butler either. I don't know what direction that school is going in, to be honest with you. It's tough. I think if they can get at least 1 win in the Big East tournament, that, okay, that's success. I think Butler just needs to get out of this season. They've had so many issues with injuries or COVID or whatever it may be. Players eligibility, I don't know. It's just, let's just get this season done. Honestly, Butler has become an afterthought in my mind as far as basketball goes. the past couple of seasons, and that's a shame.
Yeah, it won't happen because money. But I thought you were gonna go off the deep end and say that Butler needs to get out of the Big East, and I was gonna be like,
no. Well,
I
okay,
mean,
so I was talking the other night. I was talking with another former co-host of mine, Nathan Wilson.
You've had other co-hosts besides me? What?
And we were talking about Butler's issues, and the thing is, one, I think it's time. I hate to say it, but I think it's time for LaVall Jordan to go. He just hasn't been recruiting very well, and the Butler's biggest issue is they try to recruit like they did when they played in the Horizon League and the A10 or whatever conferences they were in, and that just doesn't work in the Big East. They try to go to these small Indiana high schools and find that next Gordon Hayward, that diamond in the rough type player. And that's just harder. It's hard to find. And when you're having to play against the athleticism and the strength and the size of other players from the Big East, finding that small little white boy that can shoot it out of the gym is going and asking him to go out there and light up the Big East is not an easy thing to do. So what Butler needs to do is they need to reset their mindset as far as recruiting goes and realize, hey, we aren't in the Horizon League anymore. We have to recruit and have to act like we belong in the Big East if we're going to be in the Big East. And we have to go after that Big East type player. However, the biggest issue is that the Big East type player comes from the East Coast. They don't really know who Butler is. They've grown up watching Villanova. They've grown up watching St. John's. They've grown up watching even Xavier.
Yeah.
But it's really tough trying to convince somebody from the East Coast to come to a small campus in Indianapolis when to play at the history of Hinkle just gets lost at that point when I can go play in the flashy arenas in Philadelphia and be close to my family. It is a little bit of a disadvantage, so Butler needs to start trying to look at the players that Purdue and IU and these Big Ten teams are trying to recruit and try to get them in there, or, the players that may just slightly get overlooked by the Big Ten group. Those are the types of players that they need to go after. They can't be going after the same players that Ball State and Indiana State are going after, because guess what? The MAC and the Missouri Valley are not on the same level as the Big East. You need to get your mindset changed in how you're recruiting and who you are recruiting, because the level of competition is totally different in the Big East.
So who is going to win the Big East? My prediction is going to be Villanova. I know they're the 1 seed, but they've won 4 of the last 5 Big East tournaments, including 3 in a row. So, I mean, it's almost a sure thing, right, B. Scott?
Oh, not even close. These Wildcats of Villanova are not going to win. I'm going to say my winner's Creighton. I got Creighton winning it. But Villanova's been hit by the injury bug big time. Let's see. Just recently, they have lost guard Justin Moore. He's dealing with a significant ankle sprain, so that's going to affect them right there. But the biggest one is Colin Gillespie. Colin Gillespie's out for the season. That was like their best player, and that is not an easy thing to overcome. That's essentially like a couple of years ago Purdue losing Carson Edwards, and that you don't overcome that. So Villanova is going. Can Villanova make the finals of the Big East? Yes, they can still do that. But since they've lost Colin Gillespie, they've been a totally different team, and it's been rough for them trying to figure that out. And it's not the right time of year to be trying to figure out who you are without one of your best players.
Very true. And I mean, honestly, too, I like the pick of Creighton as well. Just regardless, I think it's gonna be a good game regardless between them and Villanova for who takes the Big East. So now it's time to move to the conference that you probably all have been waiting for, and that, of course, is the Big Ten.
I thought you were going to say the SEC.
Yeah, oh my God, yeah, the SEC. We really want to talk about,
Arkansas, baby.
Arkansas. Good old Arkansas. But yeah.
Hey, we're not talking baseball. We're talking basketball?
Yes. Michigan wins the regular season in the Big Ten. Purdue finishes number 4. They do get the double bye. Purdue finishes 18-8 with a 13-6 record in the Big Ten. They finish on a 5-game winning streak. They had wins over Michigan State, number 25, Wisconsin. They are currently projected as a 4 seed in the NCAA tournament, according to ESPN Bracketology. So the question is, how far will they go in the Big Ten tournament? So more than likely, just like with most, I looked at the bracket. I tried to mentally fill it out, what I would see. And honestly, I think there's a very good chance that Purdue will play number 5 Ohio State in the 3rd round. I think there's a good chance. Ohio State's a good team. Some of the teams that would play their way to Ohio State aren't really teams that I would have much faith in for an upset. So I think it's going to be Ohio State versus Purdue in the 3rd round. Purdue did sweep the season series against the Buckeyes. Travion Williams was pretty much standard in those games. 16 points, 8 rebounds, average in both those games versus Ohio State. So it's not as if they had to have this Herculean effort to beat Ohio State both times. They were actually able to just kind of play their game and get the W. So that is what makes me more confident that, you're going to hear me say it a lot. It's tough to beat a team 3 times in one season, but I think that's what gives me the most hope that they will, is the fact that their, best players didn't have to go put out this 25, 30, 40 point effort to win the game, to overcome a, top 5 caliber, school. They, played their game, got a win. Their star players got theirs, and they came home with the W both times. So I think the Boilermakers beat Ohio State, but I think they lose to either Michigan or Michigan State. The winner of that game will play the winner of Ohio State and Purdue. And so I think they'll lose in the semifinals. Michigan did beat Purdue by 17 in the regular season. And Michigan's
different Purdue team than though.
Right, true. And Michigan State is playing their best basketball right now. So I just think that's going to be too much of an ask, for Purdue to overcome that. But I do think Purdue, Purdue kind of is, their ceiling for this whole thing is to win the Big Ten tournament, in my opinion. But I just don't think that necessarily happens. I do think they're going to lose in the semifinals, and end up with a round of 4 seed for the NCAA tournament.
For me, I think the ceiling for this Purdue team is make the Big Ten finals. I mean, if they make the Big Ten finals, then yeah, they can win it. To be honest, though, okay, so basically, when you look at this Purdue team and when they played Ohio State, when they played Michigan State, when they played Michigan, when they played Illinois, they were, they're still a young team, but they were an even younger team then, experience-wise. The way this team is coming around is forming right now. They're a team that you don't want to have to face. Does that mean they're going to win it all? No. I don't think they're going to win it all. But they do need to. I think they are going to be one of those teams that are going to be a very, very tough out for some of these teams, particularly because of how well Zach Edey is playing right now. That's key. He's had back-to-back games of over 20 points, and he's just been a matchup nightmare. And I think that confidence coming around for him is huge. And you got Jaden Ivey, who's scoring in the double figures night in and night out, and just looking like the player we all expected him to be. That is big. And if Travion Williams turns it back on, that's even bigger for this team. I do think Purdue will beat Ohio State. Ohio State has lost like 4 in a row here as of late, and they still look good. There's just something seems to be off. That killer, they just haven't never had that killer instinct, it seems like, this year. I think Purdue is playing with such confidence right now and a higher level of energy. Purdue, I think, will win that game. Besides, I do think Ohio State's going to have to be potentially going to be in a dogfight on Thursday. So Purdue coming in on Friday, having the fresh legs and everything, almost a week off, will come out of that victory. Now, this is where things can get a little dicey, in my opinion. It all depends on who the matchup is. I do think if Purdue is playing Michigan State in the semifinals, Purdue comes out on top of that game. If it's Michigan, I don't think Purdue wins that game. I think the last 2 games for Michigan, losing those, may have been flukes slightly. I think that's kind of them taking their foot off the gas pedal a little bit. All right, hey, we got the 1 seed locked up. We got the regular season Big Ten championship. Let's just not push the envelope. Let's get through these next two and get to where it really starts to matter again. So I kind of think that's what we saw. I mean, they were very competitive in both. Well, it's not the Illinois game. They looked bad in the Illinois game. But I still think it was just them kind of just letting off the gas a little bit just for health and safety purposes. Like, let's get through these alive and get to where it really matters again. But if Purdue is facing Michigan State, I think Purdue can beat Michigan State, mostly because of the size advantage that Purdue has. It's, at least when Michigan State and Michigan were playing, all they had to do was get Hunter Dickinson into foul trouble or get him tired, and okay, we got a reprieve. With Purdue, it's like, all right, we got Travion Williams. Oh, great. Now we got 7'4" Zach Edey. It's just kind of one thing after another with Purdue and that size advantage that could really wear Michigan State down. That's why I mean, you look at the matchup wise, Michigan, if they play Michigan, I don't think Purdue loses by 17 again. I think it's a much closer game because of how well Zach Edey's playing. So let's say Purdue does beat Michigan State. Then it's Purdue versus Illinois in the Big Ten championship, in my opinion. Illinois is not a good matchup for Purdue because of Kofi Cockburn. In my opinion, Kofi Cockburn is the guy that can go head-to-head with Travion Williams and Zach Edey and come out on top over both of them. He's just that good of a center. He's that forceful. And then trying to guard Ayo is not easy at all. That's a really, really good team. Does Purdue have a chance to beat them? Yeah, I think they do now because they're like I said, they're playing much better basketball now than they did when last time they played Illinois. But ultimately, I think Illinois wins the Big Ten tournament. Purdue either out in the semifinals or the finals. But watch, they'll go out now and they'll lose on Friday.
I like the pick of Illinois, not to tip both of our hands a little bit too much for who we think is going to win. Now, of course, you've got to talk about IU as well. They finished number 10 in the Big Ten. They'll face number 7 Rutgers. The Hoosiers finished 12-14. 7-12 in the Big Ten. They finished the season on a 5-game losing streak, including a loss to this very Rutgers team that they will play, and they are currently not in the NCAA tournament radar. Again, they would have to most likely either win the Big Ten or do something crazy. Need some help even, if they don't win the Big Ten tournament to get in. So how far will IU go? I think they're going to lose to Rutgers in their game. I think IU's just playing that poorly right now. I don't really have any faith in the Hoosiers to do much. Rutgers won both regular season matchups. Again, like I said, it's tough to beat a team 3 times in the same season, but IU has been so unimpressive down the stretch that I just don't have any faith that the Hoosiers are going to do much of anything. So a disappointing end to an IU season that really didn't have a whole lot of promise, but definitely could have at least netted an NCAA tournament bid. But instead, they're going to be on the outside looking in, and I don't think they're going to do much in the Big Ten tournament either.
Yeah, I don't think IU. I think IU's DOA, essentially, for the Big Ten tournament. I don't think they're playing. I don't think they care to play right now. I think we saw a little bit of their last bit of care in the Purdue game early on in their fight near the end. But honestly, I hate to say it because I don't think this is going to happen. I think IU is going to be stuck in this position for not just this rest of the season, but next season as well. But I think the players have given up on Archie, and they've just stopped listening to him and stopped playing for him altogether. So IU's one and done. I don't see this team advancing.
Yeah. And then as far as who we think will win the Big Ten tournament, we both kind of alluded to who we're going to pick. I'm going with Illinois. They ended the season on a 4-game win streak. They've won 9 of their last 11. They're playing really great basketball. In a coin flip between them and Michigan, I think I would take Illinois right now just because of how well they're playing. I think that, put them up against, even Michigan State, who's playing really good basketball right now, even if Michigan State, Purdue, whoever it is that faces Illinois, I think Illinois just is playing really inspired basketball right now, so I'm going with the Illini to win the Big Ten.
Yeah, I've already said it. I got Illinois winning it as well. They're just, especially now that Io, I don't know how to pronounce his name, now that he's back, he's got the mask and everything, but he's back and he's playing at a high level again. that team's gonna be tough to beat, even in the NCAA tournament.
So we have, of course, before we take off, we want to talk about the rest of the Power Five. We're going to go through, of course, the Big 12, Pac-12, SEC, who we think is going to win those conference tournaments. First, starting with the Big 12, I tried not to pick too many, overall number one seeds, but when when a team has won, 21 of 22 games in the regular season and they have kind of kicked it back up again, you got to go with the Baylor Bears. So I'm going with Baylor to win the Big 12. Especially because it'd be one thing if they were like 22. It's gonna be one thing if they were like 21 or 20-2 or 19-3. But because they were, the one thing you could probably hold against them is their loss to Kansas. But instead of kind of falling into a situation where they played like worse basketball, let that loss linger a little bit, they kept that momentum going. They ended the season strong with that 3-game winning streak. So if they had played a little bit more poorly, I might have gone full Craig and go upset here. But I think the Baylor Bears are just too good. So I think they win the Big 12.
I that's a good pick, but that one loss is to the team that has been an absolute dominant force in this tournament.
True.
And that's Kansas. Kansas is playing so much better right now. They are playing back to the level we all expect from Kansas. So, I'm going to go with Kansas just to be different. I mean, would I be surprised if it's Baylor? Not at all. I mean, that's a 1 seed. But Kansas can be the spoiler. Kansas can come to the party and crash Baylor's party, essentially, and potentially knock them from a 1 seed.
Yeah.
So that'll be interesting. But
I do like that.
I think that the Big 12, to be honest, I think the Big 10 and the Big 12 are the 2 conferences that are going to be the most fun to watch for their finals game. Because, with the Big 10, there's 4 or 5 teams that can win it. The Big 12, there's 2 teams, and they're on a collision course with each other, most likely. Then you got, I don't know. The Big 12 is pretty deep this year. You got with Oklahoma State. I think those are going to be the 2 conference tournaments that are going to be a lot of fun to watch.
I feel like every weekend I was getting an alert from ESPN on my phone that was like, this Big 12 matchup is really close coming down the stretch, because they were mostly ranked teams. So, you get that alert for ranked teams that are going to, Oklahoma State's going to beat Oklahoma, or West Virginia's going to beat, Oklahoma State.
The rankings this year have been dominated by the Big 10 and the Big 12.
Yeah. But yeah, I like that pick of Kansas, too, because that was kind of who I was waffling between. I was like, do I want to pick the upset here or not? So yeah, I do like that, choice with, Kansas there. As far as the Pac-12 goes, it's kind of just, who cares? Just like with most Pac-12 sports, I don't like to crap on the Pac-12 as much as we have over the past however long, but it just kind of, it just kind of is what it is. You have, I'm going to go with Colorado. And they only have 1 team ranked, and I think this is the only team they have ranked.
As of today, they have 2 teams.
Okay.
USC and Colorado.
Okay. So now
But I'll before you finalize your pick, I will say this: just tonight, Oregon clinched the regular season title.
Right. They were the bracket I saw. They were gonna win the one, or they had the 1 seed anyway. So
Okay. Isn't that weird though? Like the team that won the conference is not ranked, but
right. Yeah. It just goes to show you that the Pac-12 is just so much of a dumpster fire. It's sad to see, because like the Pac-12, gone are the days in the Pac-12 of your Kevin Loves and your James Hardens and that kind of thing.
He was Texas.
Yeah, and then even if both because back in the day, and even still to this day to an extent, you had your schools, typically the schools that were good in basketball were bad in football, and vice versa. So hey, if you are a Duke fan, well, at least you got basketball. If you're a Kentucky fan, at least you got basketball. If you're Kansas, you got basketball. If you were, if you were a USC, fan, or you were an Oregon fan or whatever, well, you had football season. Now you kind of have to, suck it up for football season. It's none of the Pac-12 is superior at anything anymore. There's no teams.
Arizona State's got a really good wrestling team.
Oh, there you go. So that's the one thing going for the Pac-12.
Track. You got to look at track. When you think of the Pac-12, track is where they're really good.
Very true.
Because, Oregon.
Yeah.
That's, but all of them are really good at track.
I'm going with Colorado to win the Pac-12. They've won 7 of their last 9, 4 straight, overall. They played Oregon and USC really well this season, which are the 2 teams ahead of them. They are 2-1 against the Ducks and Trojans this year. So I'm going with Colorado. I think they win the Pac-12 and take home the title.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Oregon. Why? I don't know. They're the regular season champs. I don't follow the Pac-12 enough to have any idea of, when I saw the rankings today and I was like, wait, Colorado and USC are ranked? I didn't know the Pac-12 was good enough to have at least one team ranked. But yeah, they got 2. And then to find out that those 2 weren't even the ones that won the conference championship.
Yeah, wild.
Go figure. So yeah, I'm going Oregon just because they've been there, they've done that, they've come close. They know how to make noise in the tournament. So I think they can do it again.
And then
not make noise, but can they win their conference?
Yeah. Finally, we talk about the SEC, the last power conference on the board. And I'm going to go with Arkansas. I think this is another number 2 seed. I was going to make mention of this at the end of the Baylor conversation. The one thing that kind of has these number 2 seeds kind of more in contention than maybe in a standard tournament or just looking at it on paper is the fact that yes, seedings can change, but I don't know. I have a hard time believing that there's any real changes in the seeds this this close to the tournament. Obviously, if you're Baylor, if you're Arkansas, you need to not lose in the first round. That would really put you at jeopardy for losing whatever seed you're in. But even if Baylor loses to Kansas, it would have to be them losing to Kansas, in my opinion, by a substantial amount. Because I think right now Kansas is projected a 3 seed, so you're really going to dock Baylor for losing to Kansas in the title, in the title. So these guys, while they mean more than the actual conference championship games in football, the conference championship games or championship tournaments still don't matter as much because I think you can still lose and still retain kind of where you're at. So that kind of gives these 2 seeds, 3 seeds a little bit of an edge because they're like, hey, we can still kind of improve our seeding. We're not locked in as a 3, as a 4, as a 5, whatever. I'm going to go with Arkansas. They're 11-1 since being blown out by Alabama. They were beaten by Alabama by 31 on January 16th. 90-59 was the final of that game, and since then they have been on a tear. They've won 8 in a row, 11-1 since that embarrassing loss. They're playing super good basketball, and the team that is in front of them is not Kentucky like you might think, is not LSU like you could think in some weird random Ben Simmons years. It's actually Alabama. So, the team that embarrassed them is the 1 seed. That's who they're going to likely play in the SEC championship. So I think they've got a little bit of a vengeance on their mind, a little bit of a collision course. So I'm going to go with Arkansas winning the SEC.
Yeah, I like that pick. I'm going to go with Arkansas as well, mostly because Alabama is kind of wavering a little bit right now. And Arkansas is turning it on and getting hot at the right time. This is the time of year where you want to be hitting your stride, getting to your peak. This is when you want to do it. You don't want to hit your peak in January because, too early. But this is the time of year that you really want to be turning it on and playing your best basketball, and that's exactly what Arkansas is doing.
Well, that will do it for this week's edition of the Crash Course Podcast. Thank you guys all for tuning in. Thank you guys all for listening as well. Remember, you can follow us on Facebook, Crash Course Podcast. Follow us on Twitter at Crash Course FM. You can come to the Twitch channel every week. That's where we record the podcast, twitch.tv/3C Media. Thank you, Dusty, for being in the chat. Thank you guys all for supporting us, not just on Twitch, but also on YouTube as well. Crash Course Podcast. Go ahead and subscribe. We're at 26 subscribers right now. I was trying to add on to that. The MCT podcast, which will come out on this coming Saturday. That's been killing it. You guys have been showing your love on the regular podcast as well. So we definitely appreciate all the love. So thank you guys all for tuning in, watching, leaving comments. We definitely appreciate you. And then remember, you can listen on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, wherever podcasts can be heard. You can hear the Crash Course podcast. B. Scott, where can they find you?
Find me on Twitter, Brandon_Scott87.
All right. Well, next week is going to be, I think, fingers crossed that we make it through this week.
It's going to take a lot to.
Oh yeah. It's
at least last year when we got to this point, there was some writing on the wall. You could see, but I mean, it would take like the apocalypse.
Yeah.
At this point.
I say it all like tongue in cheek because you're right. It would take a lot. Although when I saw the news that like Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid had gotten like busted for going out during All-Star Weekend, I was like, here we go again. This is Rudy Gobert and that whole thing again. But no, it'll take a lot, which very excited to finally see. It's crazy. 2019. Texas Tech, Virginia was the last, NCAA tournament game we got to witness, which is pretty wild. So really excited to get to that. And next week, we will be filling out our brackets live on the podcast. You won't want to miss that. It's going to be a lot of fun. Also going to be working on a little bit of a competition with those MCT podcast gentlemen as well for the tournament as well. So you won't want to miss that.
I mean, come on, we're the veteran crew here. We got to win this thing, right?
Yeah, we do. We have to show them what we're made of. So I'm really excited for that. So get ready for Selection Sunday in the NCAA tournament. We will see you next week. But until then, have a good one, everybody.